variable, and therefore there's nothing there. And you might not be able to do any arithmetic with it. So you might run into issues like that. Or you're trying to get color, which is now set to null. If you had not referred it to in this particular constructor, it would have been set to null. And then you're trying to refer to that particular color, and there's nothing there. So null basically means absence of a value. It doesn't mean spaces, or it doesn't mean anything else. It just means absence of a value. And the operating system is responsible for putting that unknown value that you and I will never be able to figure out what it is. So we call it null. Okay. And handling nulls is always a problem in the sense that you always should be handling nulls proactively so that you never run into an issue where your program crashes. And for the most part, it's usually, there are a lot of errors that show up because of null value, because you're trying to do something with a attribute or a variable which has a null value, and it cannot handle any operation, meaning you cannot add anything to null, you cannot multiply anything with null. So it cannot see, so Java cannot handle that kind of an operation. That's why programs crash. So you should be aware of where those nulls exist and make sure that you handle them correctly. All right. So we went ahead and created these constructors. We also created getters and setters, and I call them getters and setters because that's how they are referred to in the Java world. The get methods are basically accessors, meaning they are basically reading the attribute value that you have set and giving it back to whoever is calling this method. Setters, on the other hand, are mutators. Mutators change the state of the object. This is the get method, or the accessor is merely reading the values in the object that the object holds. The set method, on the other hand, changes the state, meaning you're now getting a new radius. So I'm going to change the current value of the attribute called radius to some other value. So therefore, my circle object is going to be different from 5 seconds before. Then you have other methods that you might want to include, like calculate area, calculate perimeter, etc. Now, I just wanted to show you something that I noticed in some of the midterm submissions. And even though I had specifically said that comments have to be in this format, in this specific format, and I'd even given that as part of the instructions, many of you followed that, but most of you ignored it for methods. And I did say that, comments are important above each method definition. So if you have a method, above the method, you should have a method description, one sentence, and it has to be in this format. Now, let's say, for example, I have a method called, I just call it calculate. It's actually supposed to be calculate circumference, but I went ahead and named it calculate. And I put my comments in this format. Or it could even be that I put my comments in the 2 slashes, the line comment, that was my comment. So for example, let's say I did it in this block comment. Now see, the color in Eclipse for the block comment is green, for the Java doc style is blue. So I called my method calculate. Calculate can be anything. It doesn't tell me what it is, but I went ahead and put a block comment which says this method returns the area of a circle. Now in my circle tester, so I'm going to go ahead and save this. Now in my circle tester, I am going to call upon that calculate method. So here I created my circle C3 and I've given it a radius of 10. And then I said, okay, go ahead and calculate the area. And then I called upon this other method called calculate. Now, I don't know, as far as I'm concerned, that circle.java was compiled and given to me. So I will never be able to see the source code. I'm not given the source code, okay? I'm only creating my class, which is making use of circle. And therefore, I call upon this calculate method without knowing what it's supposed to be. So let's say I go ahead and retype that. So for example, I do C3 dot, and it gives me the list of methods that are available. Now, calculate is a public method, so therefore I can use it. So I go to calculate. What is the documentation there? Nothing. It doesn't tell me what that method is. Whereas on the other hand, if I go to calculate area, it tells me, because of that documentation sitting there in my circle class, in a specific format, it tells me that this method calculates the area of a circle. And therefore, I know exactly what it's supposed to do or what it's all about. And that's important to me because I have no idea about that circle class. source code. I'm not given that. And in most cases, you will never be given the source code of these classes. You are just going to be given the object code or the class, and then in fact, it's usually packaged up in a way that you'll never be able to know what the logic inside that class is. And if somebody hasn't written these descriptions for these methods, you will not know what it's about. So in this case, I go ahead and call upon calculate and I have no idea what calculate. Okay. So I use this method, and then I'm going to print out a value. Now, how do I know whether that calculate is calculating circumference, or if it is calculating the half of the circumference or a quarter of that circumference, or it could be something else. It could be adding the radius or multiplying the radius by 2 and giving me the diameter. I have no idea. It doesn't tell me anything. So that is the reason why I keep repeating myself over and over again and including them as instructions in assignments, that this is the style that must be included. And this is exactly the reason why. Now, let me go ahead and change this one more time. Now it's become a Javadoc style comment. I save this, and I go back into Circle Tester. And if I do, even if I had named the method incorrectly, because now it doesn't even say calculate circumference, at least it just says calculate. Now, if I go ahead and call upon calculate, I'm able to at least see something. Now it says it's the area of a circle, but actually it should be the circumference of the circle. So circumference. So let's say this was the actual description that was there, and I'm going ahead and calling upon calculate. And if I hover my mouse cursor over that, you can at least see that description saying that even though the method says calculate, it at least tells me what that method is actually doing. And therefore, if I really am interested in circumference, I can make use of that method. Okay, I hope everybody understands the reason why I keep talking about method descriptions and class descriptions being in a certain fashion. So for example, if I hover over circle, it doesn't tell me anything, but I'm at least able to figure out what that particular class is all about. So for example, here, if I hover over that circle, the name circle, this is the documentation that was sitting on top of that file, and I'll be able to figure out saying, okay, this class is the definition of a circle. So it obviously talks about everything that a circle does. I've created my class with certain capabilities or behaviors, and it's able to give me that information based on this. All right. So let's move on to writing methods. So now I've got my circle in this circle tester. I've created 3 circles, and maybe I want to create an array of circles, and I want to do something with those array of circles. Right? So I'm going to call upon a method, and I'm going to say create circle array. And I'm going to, it's going to return back a circle array for me, meaning an array of circles. So this is going to be circles equals create circle array, and then it takes in nothing. No arguments, nothing. Right? So the method has to do all of that. So at this point, I go ahead and create a method. Now, if you look at the method, definition or the signature of the method, it says that return type is circle array, meaning now I can go ahead and create arrays of objects, not just arrays of integers or arrays of floats or arrays of Booleans. I can create arrays of objects. So at each member of the array is of type circle. Okay, and each circle, each object member of that array is an independent circle, meaning each of them will have a radius, each of them will have a color, and each of them can exhibit all these behaviors that I have set, like calculate area, calculate circumference, get radius, set radius, all of that stuff. It'll be able to exhibit all those behaviors and have all those attributes, each individual circle. So now I go into my method, and I have to now start creating an actual circle array. So I say circle, let's say C equals new circle. What is the size? How many circles would you like to create? So let's say I want to create 5 circles. So now I have an array which is made up of 5 members. Each member is of type circle. Now, if I want to go ahead and do something about each individual circle, I have to first of all create a circle for that for each member. So I use a for loop for int I equals 0, and this is just my index or the subscript value. So I equals 0, I less than C dot. Now, because it's an array, I'm going to go ahead and, int I equals 0. So C dot, guess what? You have length now. Because it's an array, it has a length available. And therefore, I can go through that array, just like how I went through the array for my integer arrays or my Boolean arrays, etc. Right? Now, at this point, I am at circle subscript 0, meaning, or C subscript 0, which is my first member of my circles array. Now I'm going to say C subscript I, which is the first, whichever subscript you're at, equals, guess what? I have to create a new circle now. And maybe I'm going to provide it with a radius, the circle 4, because that constructor allows me to create a circle with just the radius. I can call upon that constructor, and I can create a circle object at that location in my circle array. Everybody with me so far?
Yep.
Okay. So now I can display, now that I have set my radius value to 4 for that individual circle member of my circle array, I can say system.out.println C of I, which is that, the first circle, and then guess what? You have all your methods available. So let's say I want to do calculate area. I want to find the area of that first circle that I create. So now at the end of this, I can, when I come out of the for loop, I have my circle array created. All I can do is just return that circle array back to my main method, which is now going to be stored. Remember, it's one copy of the array. I'm not copying the array, right? So that one copy of the array sitting in memory, it's now going to be referred to as circles from the main method. Just like how you were talking about returning arrays, this is just the same thing. You're returning an array, just that in this case, the array happens to be of type circle. Okay, so if I were to, I'm going to just place a description here before I forget. And return value is a circle type. So at this point, I've got my circles in my main method. What can I do with it? I can create another for loop if I want, and now I can calculate circumference here if I want, or I can just print out what the radius is in each of those circles. So for int I equals 0, I less than circles dot length, I plus plus, and then I can just say system dot out dot println circles subscript I dot get radius. So now I'm going to just get the radius for each of the circles which I created in my method. The circle array got created in my method. It returned the array. Now I'm going to look into that same array using a different reference variable because the scope of C was limited to this method. I'm going to have to call it by some other name, which is local to main. And so now I'm going to say, okay, give me for every circle in the array, get me the radius. So if I run this, and I'm just going to comment out all the rest of it because I don't want that to redo everything. So I'm just going to add a block comment for that. Okay, so that's going to get commented out. So all we're doing is creating an array of circles. So if I run this now, you got, in this case, 5 areas right? Because we call calculate area in the method. And we got 4. For each circle, we set a value 4 as a radius. Now, you could change that if you want. So you could say, for example, I want my radius value int r equals, let's say, 4. And then I'm going to do set r. But then for each time I come back into the loop, I'm going to change the value of r to be one more than the previous value. So I can do r plus plus, and then I come in. Actually, I should do it after. Sorry, hang on. So I set the value of r, and then I increment it so that the next time I come back into the loop, it has a new value. So if I run this again, you should see 5 different circles with 5 different radii. There you go. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. So in this case, we are returning a circle type reference back to the calling method. So in any case, whether it's an array made up of numbers or an array made up of classes that we have designed and implemented, it doesn't matter. They're all objects. And in that case, you're only passing back the references. If it was an integer array as well, you would still pass back the reference to the array, because an array is not a primitive type. An array is something that we have made up. All right, it's not out of the box, given to us as a primitive type in Java. The primitive types are those individual values in the array. Like if it was an integer array, the individual values are integers, and those are primitive types. But in this case, neither is the array the primitive type, nor is circle a primitive type, because we have created circle. We have come up with this new type called circle. If you were to create a class called car, you can create an array of cars, and each car could have a model, a make, a year, an MSRP value, a color, all those other features, and then you could figure out what the fuel efficiency of that was. You could calculate that based on the odometer reading, based on the gas tank. So you can go all out, but each of them will be an individual car in the array. Okay. So then you can figure out given the array of cars, you can figure out, okay, which has the highest fuel efficiency. Or in this case, you can figure out, okay, which one of them is the largest circle. How would you do that? If you were to find out which of these 5 circles is the largest circle, how would you figure this out? So for example, it returned back you a circle array. And I've got my circle array here. Given that, and I have no idea what those individual radii are. Okay, let's say that part was invisible to me, and somebody else has done that and given to me an array of circles. How would you find out what the largest radius is in those circles? If I were to write a method, how would I do this? So I'm going to call upon a method, and I'm going to return back, let's say, a double value. So double largest or max radius equals find max radius, and I'm going to pass in circles to it. So now I'm passing in an object, which is an array type, but an array type of circles to a method. Okay, so in my method now, if I were to go ahead and create this method, that method is expecting a circle array coming in, and it's going to return a double value. Earlier, we took nothing in this create circle array, but we returned back a circle array type. Here, we are getting a circle array as an input parameter, but we are returning a regular old double as a return type. So given this input parameter called circles, how would you find the max radius? Who can tell me what the logic should be? It's okay if it's not accurate. Just go ahead and volunteer something. What should I do first? I have 5 circles. I just need to find the maximum radius. So what should I do first before I even start looking into that array?
Maybe we need to declare the variable.
Okay, what kind of a variable?
Like the minimum and the maximum radius.
So I just have it as I'm just looking for maximum. So I'm just going to have a max value radius. Okay, sounds good. So max r equals, and I'm just going to initialize that to 0.0. All right, so what next? That's a good start. What next? Now I have to start looking into the array. So in order for me to look into the array, what do I need? Remember, in the final exam, you will be getting questions like this to be able to read code and figure out what's happening in that code. So you should be able to read and understand code. You may not be executing anything or writing any code yourself, but you should be able to read the code and figure out what the code is actually doing. So what should I do in order to get into the array? Nobody? We've gone through an entire unit on repetitive structures. We've gone through an entire unit on arrays. You have to call the array. Well, I have the array here. There's no question of calling the array. I have the array at my disposal. This is my local variable.
We're going to use
it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we're going to, so we're looking for the max radius, right?
So I've got my max, this is my variable, local variable here called max radius. Okay, but what do I need to do in order for, I need to first look inside this circle array. So what do I
use for loop?
Thank you. That's all I'm looking for. Don't overthink it. So for int I equals 0, I less than circles dot length. Okay. Now that I'm in my for loop, what do I need? How do I find the radius of the current circle that I'm looking at? The current circle is called circle subscript I, right? So how do I find the radius of that circle? So go back into my circle definition. How do I find the radius of a circle?
We divide the area circle on the tie.
Yeah, but how do I get the value of the radius of my current circle object, which is indicated as circle subscript I? So the current circle object that I'm looking at is called circle, I can't type today, circle subscript I. That is the current member of the array that I'm looking at. The array has 5 members. Each member is a circle object. But the current subscript that I'm looking at, whichever, maybe 0, it may be 1, whatever, but the current subscript or the location in the array that I'm looking at has a circle in that spot. Okay, so it's like this. If I were to draw it out, I have an array made up of 5 circles. Okay, so each of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm going to have a circle in each of these locations. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, and they're all different lengths, different radius. So I'm right now at this location. There is a circle object. There are obviously some attributes and methods associated with this circle object, which is defined by what we have defined in our circle class. Okay? If I want to find out, given this circle, and this is basically called, if I were to, refer to that particular the member of this circle, it's going to be called C or circle or whatever your reference variable is, subscript I. It should be circle, sorry. Pardon my handwriting. So this is circle I, circle subscript I. I could be whatever value here. Right now the I starts with 0, so therefore this value will be circle 0. Circle 0 points to an object. How do I find the radius of that object? You can tell me. What happens if I hit dot? Do I get anything? Nothing. The circles, sorry. Circles. So circles I, how do I find the radius? If anybody's paying attention at all, or just relying on the recording. How do I get the radius? No, I'm not talking about pi. I'm talking about getting the radius. There's a method here. I guess I'm only talking into the void here, but it is what it is. I mean, I can't use the get radius method. Thank you. That's all it was. So I'm going to take that get radius method and figure out if that is greater than max R, whatever the value of max R is. So let me clear my drawings first. All right, so I'm going to find out if circle I dot get radius is greater than max R, which is now set to 0, but I'm going to reset it. If it is greater than max R, then max R equals circles I dot get radius. Does this make sense? All right. At the end of this for loop, max R will have a value. And that's what I'm returning. So here, when I go to display max R, I don't have to publish the recording. I can just be silent. I don't have to do it. But so at this point, I'm just going to display the max radius is and the max radius is 8 because the max radius here is 8. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. So we talked about how you can pass circles as arguments to methods, and also how you can return a circle or array back as a return value. It could even be a single circle as a return value, but in this case, we return an entire array of circles as a return value. Okay? So let me just update my description here. All right, so can I overload the create circle array method? I should be able to overload any method. So right now I have my create circle array, which is accepting nothing. I could have another method here, which is similar to this in name and return type, but the input arguments are going to be a little different. So I'm going to write a completely new method called, to copy this. So I'm going to create a completely new method, the exact same return type, and create circle array is going to be accepting maybe a length of the array. So int length. And in this case, I'm going to be using that length to create my circle, the circle array. So here I'm going to say, instead of saying circle C equals new circle 5, I'm going to go ahead and use that incoming value of length as the length of the array. And I'm going to return a circle array. So return C. So now I can go ahead and get values, populate the values inside this method, no matter what the length of the array was. All I did was I overloaded this create circle array method. One way is by not giving it any input argument. There are no input parameters here, right? It's just going ahead and setting the length to 5, meaning you have no choice but to work with a 5-member array. Here, I'm giving the option by saying, you tell me what the length of the array is. I'll create that length and return that array back. Okay, so in my main method, I could say circles C1 equals create circle array. And then in my input argument, I could provide, let's say, 10. Now that 10 circle, so right now I'm going ahead and creating, so change type to, what did I do here? Circle array, sorry. So I'm returning back a circle array from that method, but this time I'm passing in the length. Earlier, I didn't pass in anything. The method created the array and returned me back the circle object, the circle array, the circles object, and the array of circles basically. Here, I'm just passing in the length. So now I have a little more flexibility about how big the array should be. I could have, an input coming in from the user saying, okay, what is the size of the array you want to create? And that variable could be passed in here. So there's a lot more flexibility here, but the rest of the logic is pretty much the same. So I'm going ahead and I'm going to call this particular, I'm basically going to use the rest of this logic, maybe, I don't know. And I'm going to create a 10-member circle in this case. Starting at 4, I keep incrementing the value by 1 for each consecutive array member. And I'm going to have 10 circles in that array because I passed in a length of 10. If I passed in a length of 20, I'd have a 20-member array. And again, starting at 4 and then incrementing the value by 1, and then a 20-member circle array is passed. So now I have basically made it a little more flexible by what is called overloading. So overloading is changing the method signature ever so slightly, but the name of the method is exactly the same. That cannot change, because if it changes, then it's a whole new method. So now I can use that same method name, but I can call it either with an input argument or without an input argument. Same way that we did in the circle class by creating 3 different constructors, one with 2 arguments, one with no arguments, and one with 1 argument. So in this way, you can create circles in one of three ways. Okay? Any questions so far? Anybody? All right. All right, let's create another class here. And this time I'm going to call this class person. So basically what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create what is called an address book. So this class defines an entry in an address book. So what are the possible attributes you can think of for a person? Who can tell me? Okay, age is one, but other than age, what defines a person? If you have an address book, what do you think goes into your address book? You have an address book on your phone. What are the things that you maintain in there? More than age, I hope. Nobody? No interest whatsoever? Come on, what defines a person?
Phone number, name,
No,
age. Oh,
no, more than that. How do you maintain your contact list? Look into your phones and look at your contacts. What is it that you have in there? How do you know who each person is? A name, yes.
She said name.
Who said name? I didn't hear it. I was looking at the chat here, so if you had said it already, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. But so name. So what would your attribute look like? What kind of data type is a name?
string.
String. So I'm going to go ahead and type in, where am I? Private string name. And if you want to be really specific, right? What else? Okay, you can have middle initial, okay. Private. What kind of data type would be middle initial?
Integer.
Middle initial.
So I'm thinking about something else.
R. Excellent. R. Just going to call it middle. All right. So now that we have our name sorted out, what's next? You said age part, but then I can always calculate age. Because age today is not going to be the same as age 6 months from now. So why would I want to calculate age? Remember what I said about calculated values in a class? Right.
Phone number.
Okay, but in terms of the actual date of birth, so let's say we want to have, I'm going to keep this as a string for now, but there is something called a date type in Java, which we're not going into. But if you want to explore that, go ahead and do that at some point later in the future. But right now, I'm just going to call it date of birth. And we can always convert this to a date type, but we're going to leave it for now. Okay, you said phone number. So again, another. Okay, what else? Looks like everything is a string or a car. What else can you have as an integer here? Okay, so you have your name, you have your date of birth, you have your phone. What else would you have?
Social security number?
No, not in your address book. No. No. Email. Okay. What else? So now these get to the address part of it. So and then maybe I want to have, and this is not really usually done, but maybe I'm going to have this as an integer for whatever reason. I just want to show you how you can include multiple data types in a class. Now, you want to generate getters and setters for all of them. In this case, yeah, you want to make sure that you're able to update, if there are any changes or any spelling mistakes in the name, you want to correct it. Maybe you made a mistake in the telephone number, you want to correct it, email address, so on, or change an email address. You might want to update a few things. So all of them should be mutatable, right? So I'm going to show you an easy way to do that in Eclipse. So you have let's say these are all your attributes in your class that you have defined. Okay, and there may be a few more, but let's assume that these are the ones that you're going to stop at. You can go into source and look at generate getters and setters. So let me actually stop this and go into my desktop sharing. That way you can see it. Okay, so if you go into the source menu, hide this as well. Everybody see my source menu here right on the top? If you click on source, I have to first of all focus in my window here. So source, and then come down here and you see this menu item called generate getters and setters. You click on that. Eclipse now tells you which of these would you like to generate getters and setters for, meaning those accessor and mutator methods. I'm just going to go ahead and select all. And then come down here and it says, where should my insertion point be? It should be after my zip code, meaning I want to make sure that all the methods gets placed after my attribute. You want to organize your class in such a way that the attributes are on top and then the methods start. But then you also want to make sure that you have all your getters and setters in one place in the class. So it's easy to kind of go through the class and understand what the getters and setters are. So in the end, your source code should be organized properly. I mean, there is no set rule, but it's again, convention that you organize your source code in a way that it is not, completely disorganized, that you have to start searching for methods all over the place. You want them all similar methods in one place. So then I want to make all of them public because my getters and setters are all going to be public. And I also want to generate method comments. Look at that. There's something easy here. You can always configure your code template for your comments. That's a whole other story. I'm not going into that. So now all I have to do is I've selected 8 fields or 8 attributes, a getter and a setter for each. So therefore 16 methods will get generated. If I hit generate now, look at this. You don't have to write any of this. It's all done. Now, obviously, you're going to have to change the sentence here. There's got to be some effort that each developer has to put in. Even though Eclipse does most of this work for you, you still have to go and modify the comment. Because like I said, when you go to use this class, you want to make sure that you know exactly what that method is all about. So it's your responsibility to change the comment or the description of each method. One sentence. So for example, if I go to the first one here, simple getter method is not going to cut it because that's not going to tell you anything. It's just going to say this method returns the first name. That's it. So even though the method name might be intuitive enough, it is still a good idea to do this. So each of those descriptions must be updated. Now, at the end of all of this, what else do I need? I need a constructor. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just place my cursor between the attributes and my start of that getters and setters block. Okay, it's a blank line there. I'm going to go back into source, and I'm going to go ahead and generate constructors using fields. And then I click on that. It tells me what is it that I want to generate. How do I want to generate this constructor? Does it expect any input parameters? Maybe I want my first name and last name. The rest I don't have to worry about now. I'm just going to say first name and last name. I want to be able to generate a contact, meaning one entry in my address book with at least the person's first name, last name, and maybe phone. Okay? And then I'm going to place it after that zip code attribute, which is the last of my attributes. And I want to generate constructor comment. And that's it. I'm going to hit generate. And here is my, I'm going to remove this one line here because I should have done that in my options. But anyway, don't worry about that for now. So right now I've got my constructor, which is, and the comment is already even input for you. Construct a new person object. How about that? They wouldn't do it for the getters and setters, but Eclipse does it for your constructor. It expects 3 input parameters, first name, last name, and phone. It sets the values. Now, like I said, because you have declared all these attributes as attributes of this class, you must use that and use them in your constructor, even though they are not coming in as input arguments and getting set via input arguments. You must at least go back and find those values, those attributes, and set them to some default value. So for example, you can say middle equals nothing. So maybe you can say middle equals, or you can set a default value of 8 or whatever. It doesn't matter. I'm just giving that as an example. You can say date of birth equals, and then within quotes you can say 1/1/1970 for whatever reason, 1970. And then you can say phone is already coming in. Email address can be email equals x@x.com or whatever, some default email address. And then you have your address, ADDR equals an empty string, and zip code, you can set that because it's an integer, you can set it to 0. So now you have made sure that all your attributes are either set via the input parameters or you set them to default value. So later on, when you go to refer to these, at least you can see some value in there, and you will know whether it's a default value, because you are the designer of this class, you know how to handle these attributes because they don't have any attributes set, they don't have any values set, but you set them as default value. But you at least are referring to them in your constructor. Now you might see this word called this. The only time you will use this, and according to good Java programming practice, this basically refers to the current object. So when you're creating an object of type person, this dot first name refers to the object's attributes, the instance attributes, existence by qualifying it with the word this. And the only time you would want to use the qualified name, qualified this dot, is when you're trying to differentiate between the object's attributes and an incoming parameter, the name that is there. So for example, if I take this off, it basically means first name equals first name, and it actually makes no sense because you're basically saying this first name equals first name. You're not really changing anything, and the object's attributes will not get changed, will not get set. So in order to make sure that you are setting this value and assigning this value that's coming in to the object attributes called first name, you have to precede it with the word this and this dot. Don't do it in any other case where, let's say, for example, this was F name, and this was L name, and this was CEL. You don't need to use the word this. There is no need for that. In fact, it is considered an expensive thing to refer to it as this. So all you have to do is say first name equals F name, last name equals L name. There is no confusion there. The only time when there is confusion is when you have the input parameters names being the same as the object attribute name. Only then you will have to precede the attribute names with the word this dot. Okay? But now that we have a constructor, we are expecting that an object of type person must be created with a first name, last name, and a telephone number. And other attributes in the object are going to be set to default values. We have our getters and setters. And now let's say you want to have a method that will display the name, first name, space, middle initial, dot, space, last name. Maybe you can have a method that will display that. So for example, if I say public, I'm going to create a completely new method now. Public string, it's going to return back a string. Display, or rather, construct full name. And it doesn't take any parameters because it's going to make use of the object attributes itself. I'm just going to say return first name plus, sorry, this was lowercase f. First name plus middle plus dot space plus last name. Now, what will happen because middle is a car, is it okay to do this, or should I typecast it to a car? Who can tell me this? Should I be typecasting middle to a car, or is this okay? All right, we're going to take, middle should be typecasted as a car since it was defined as a car. So in this case, it's getting concatenated to string variables. So should I be typecasting to a car? So let's see how this works. So I'm going to create a completely new class now, which is going to make use of this person class. And I'm going to call it address book. And it's going to have a main method. And in that main method, I'm going to create person P1 equals new person. And I'm going to provide it with names. So the first name is going to be, I don't know, let's do Ada Lovelace. And her telephone number happens to be 555-1212 for whatever reason. Never had a phone, but whatever. So I've created my person object, and I've just given those three input parameters that were expected as for the constructor. Now, if I want to go ahead and display that full name, so if I say system.out.println P1 dot construct full name. what should happen here? Should I be able to run this and get A as the middle, because I've set my default value as A for middle initial. And I did. So I forgot to include a space. So let me go back and include a space there. So here I have to put space dot, no, sorry, not there. So this has to be here. So space plus that. So you got to format it correctly. All right, so now if I rerun my address book, I should be able to see A space dot, lovely. So I didn't have to typecast. Typecasting is when you're using that car individually as a car, not when it's combined with a concatenation situation like here, where you're concatenating it with strings. So then this automatically becomes part of that string. So there's no need to concatenate that. Okay? All right, let's take a 10-minute break. We'll be back at 12:20.
Recording stopped.
Everybody back? All right, let's create the address book using, we are user input. So go ahead and set up your scanner. We actually continue recording.
Recording in progress.
So we are going to get all the data for the address book via user input. So system.in. Import scanner. Now, obviously, I'm going to be doing everything in a loop because I want to make sure that I get all the values for, and maybe I want to have more than one address in there, more than one entry. So I'm just going to set up my loop so that I have it as, maybe 2 addresses or 3 addresses. So for int I equals 0, I less than 3, maybe 3 addresses, I plus. Okay, in here, I'm going to say system.out.println. But before that, we need to create our address. We need to create a person object. So first I'm going to do is, I'm going to say person. Actually, I'm going to create what is called a person array. So person P1, or rather person array persons, or we can call this address book or addresses, equals new person. And then here I can't use my default constructor because I've specified that my constructor must have some input arguments. So I can, so when I go to test my classes, this is how I would test it. I would go ahead and go back and make sure that I at least provide, because I'm creating an array of persons, as for my address book, I need to somehow be able to create an empty person object, because in my loop, I'm actually getting all that data, right? So in my person class, I'm going to go ahead and set up a default constructor, or what's called a no arg constructor, which doesn't accept anything. So I'm going to say public person, and that's it. There's nothing else there, right? So now I can go ahead and create my person class, which I should save this as well. I'm just causing an error here. Public person. Oh, sorry. I'm just creating this. So new. What did I do here? Who can tell me what I'm doing here? I'm trying to create a circle array. So what should I do in order to create a person array? Here I created a circle array. So what should I do there? I'm trying to create a person array here. So what can I do? Anybody? If anybody's listening, I'm trying to create an array of persons. What do I need? I can't. The length. I'm saying I want an address book of 3 persons or 3 slots for I can create a person in each of those, each of those locations in the array. So my address book has 3 entries. person I equals, in this case, addresses I equals new person. Now, I'm going to have to ask for first name, last name, and telephone number. So enter first name, addresses, subscript I, dot, set first name, and in here, in dot, next line. So what am I doing here? I'm saying, displaying a message to the user saying enter first name, and then I am taking whatever is coming in from the scanner and using it as an argument to my set first name method in my person class. Does that make sense? Yes or no? Anybody? All right. Tough crowd today. All right. System.out.println, enter last name. If you don't understand, you're supposed to ask questions, and not just be silent. Or if you understand, say you understood. I cannot read minds. I'm going to use the same thing, but I'm going to change the method now to set last name. So this becomes dot set last name. And set last name uses in dot next line, because it's, after all, a string that's coming in. So the value coming in from the input stream gets sent as an argument to the set last name method of the current person object in the addresses array. Okay? And the last thing is going to be enter telephone number. And it's going to be addresses dot set phone set phone in dot next line. So at the end of this, I have been able to capture 3 people's first and last name and telephone number in my address book, which is basically an array of type person. Now, after this, I want to display the address book. So display address book, and I'm going to pass in the addresses, or the addresses array, which is made up of person object. And I go to create that method. This now takes in an input argument or a parameter of type person array, and it's called addresses. Or you can call whatever you want in the local variable. You can change it to whatever you want. But it's a void method. It doesn't return anything because all I'm doing is displaying. So now I'm going to say system.out.println. Actually, before that, I need a loop. So for int I equals 0, I less than addresses dot length I plus plus, and all I'm doing inside that is displaying the 3 different values. Addresses I dot get first name, plus, I'm going to put a tab character. Yeah, tab character. Plus addresses I dot get last name plus, I'm actually going to format this a little better. And then put another tab character there. Plus addresses I dot get phone. Now, if I go to run this, it should display it should first of all ask me for three address book entries and then display the address book in the end. So this method displays the current address book. So if I run this now, I should be able to get the three values entered. So enter first name. I'm just going to put in some junk values. AAA. Telephone number is 12345. Enter first name for the second entry is B. And then C. I didn't enter a value for last name. I missed it. That's okay. And therefore, this is your address book. So you can see how I missed entering the last name for the last person, and you get a blank value there. Make sense? All right, this completes whatever we had to do for classes and objects. If you have any questions about the homework, please ask now. Don't assume that I won't answer questions. This is the time to discuss whatever questions you have about the homework. So feel free to ask me whatever questions. I'll upload these classes to Canvas, so you'll have this as an example to refer to. There's also your textbook. The textbook, the chapter has a lot of explanation about how classes can be written, how you can do UML. You can have a class diagram using UML. They explained it very well in there. So I urge you all to refer to the chapter and also try out some of the questions at the back of the chapter. That's my request. The rest is up to you whether you want to do it or not. But it's there. The textbook is pretty clear on this. And all you need is that one chapter. You're not doing anything more than this. Earlier, there used to be, a lot more to classes and objects. They've kind of removed that from the curriculum. So it's only this chapter. All right. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to ask.
Recording stopped.
I'm just going to stop this share and go into Canvas. And if you have any, so go into modules right there. So homework 7. So are there any questions about part A or part B? Or if you're stuck somewhere, ask me, and we can work it out together. Okay, go ahead, Rashid. What was your question? Yeah, that's fine. You can use a Word document, in which case you just have a table, a table in Word. And so, for example, if I were to use my Word document here, I'll show you how to do that. Hang on. Everybody can see my Word document?
No, I still see Canvas.
You can only see Canvas. Okay, let me share that. I think I missed my. All right, now clear? All right, so if I were to create a UML diagram in Word, all I have to do is go and insert a table, and a table with 3 rows and 1 column, okay? And then the first column is going to be the name of the class. So for example, if I were to do it for that person, class that we just created, I'm going to call it, the class name will be person. And if I want to center this, I go back and I hit center. So it's in the center. The next will be the next section will be all the attributes. So I'm going to have a minus sign to indicate that it's a private. Hang on, let me actually change the font of this so that it's clearer. Okay, so minus sign indicates that it's a private attribute. And I'm going to say first name and what kind of data type it is, string. And then the second one is going to be last name, data type is string. And actually, I should put that in the second section itself. Sorry about that. Hang on. In the second one, enter. Yeah. And then, so the second section will have all the attributes listed. And then I'll have another private variable called middle, and that will be a car. And the next one will be phone, and that will be a string, and so on. So in the third section is where you're listing your behaviors or the methods. So I could have my constructor. So person is my constructor, and it doesn't return anything, and it's a public method because constructors are public. And it takes in, and so I have 2 kinds of constructors. So one is which takes nothing. The other one is it takes three input parameters. So I'm going to say person, and then I'm going to have including in there. I think your textbook probably does it a little bit differently, but it's okay. You can use either one is fine. So just to indicate that these are input parameters. So I'm expecting 3 strings to indicate first name, last name, and telephone number, and it returns nothing. So those are my constructors. If I wanted to indicate my accessor method, I could have something that says get first name, which doesn't return which returns something. So the return value is, it's going to return a string. So if you had, so for example, if I were to do my set method, so I could say set first name, I would indicate what my input parameter is. It's expecting a string, and it returns void because there's nothing getting returned from my set method. It accepts a new value, and in the method resets this value, this attribute to that new value that's coming in, and then returns nothing. You cannot indicate a void for constructors, remember. Okay, because the constructor doesn't return a specific value. It returns an object, yes, but you cannot indicate that you cannot even say void for a constructor. But for the others, you have to indicate whether it's a value returning method or a void method. Does this make sense? Your school account is no longer active. I don't understand what that means. If it's something to do with your Nova account, please get in touch with IT because I can't help you with that. That's something IT has to do. Okay, all right. So you can either use Word or you can use Draw.io like I did last time. It's up to you. Okay? Any other questions about the homework? And then once you complete the UML for one of these three, you got to take that and actually implement that as a class. And you've got to show how that class can be used, like how we did it just now in class with person and address book, or circle and circle tester. And there are examples in your textbook as well. Any questions? The next class we are going to be starting on, that's the only class about strings. So we're going to look at a non-primitive type called strings and what we can do with strings. But this is the end of the classes and objects unit. So can I assume that there are no questions and everybody's going to do excellent on the homework and be able to get full credit? Yes? Yes or no? In all aspects of programming, I mean, and style and everything has to be exactly how we have discussed over and over again this term. So by now you should be able to write a class with everything included. Because missing out on one of those aspects that are needed for a Java class is, you shouldn't be doing that at this point. I have office hours listed for tomorrow morning. If anybody's interested, you can sign on. I'll send you a Zoom link. And if you have any questions, I can clarify it. If not, I'm available by email. Please feel free to ask. And don't hesitate to, if you're stuck somewhere, feel free to, ask me and I can clarify. I may not give you the actual answer, but I can at least point you in the right direction. Because homework should be your effort, but I can definitely help you, if you're stuck somewhere. So don't hesitate to ask. Okay. If there's nothing else, then I think we can end the class here, unless you have something that you want to talk about and you want to discuss. Anything that is not clear to you, I'm available. If
Professor?
not, yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
How do I view the rubrics for past homeworks we've done like a long time ago, like homework 2 and homework 3?
The rubrics.
Like what you asked us to do for it?
So it should be in the instructions.
So when I click on grades, it only shows my files that I submitted. It doesn't show
You can't see the actual.
Yeah.
Okay, let me look into that. So which ones do you want? So for example, if I look at homework, hang on. If I look at homework 7, are you not able to see this?
Well, I can see that because it's in the future.
No, I know, but for the previous ones I meant.
No, I cannot see that. That's what I want.
Interesting. I don't know why, because you should be able to view it.
Can
so
you
if you go down to,
can you see it?
If you go down to, I can't see it on your behalf. I can, I don't know.
I can show you what my screen looks like.
Hang on 1 second. The code for the attendance is all the way up here, 3282. All right, so if you go down to, let's say, I don't know, parallel arrays, right? And you click on homework 6. Can you go into the module section like I have and open up a particular module? Not through your grade book, not through your submission.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's it. Okay.
Yes, you can?
Yeah. Got it. Thank you.
That's all you have to do. Yep. So through your grade book, you can view your submissions, yes. But if you want to see the actual questions, just go into the module section. It's all available. It may not be, you may not be able to submit something because the due date has passed, but you can definitely read it.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
That's one thing nice about Canvas, because in Blackboard, it's a completely different story. Don't even go there. It's one of those things with Blackboard. Yeah, 3282 Gigi.
Okay.
Got it? So for homework 7, I mean, seriously, yeah, I know some of you missed out. I don't know whether you didn't read the instructions clearly or not for the other assignments and for the test, but please read through this. And if you have any questions before submission, double check your submission, because some of you could have gotten perfect scores for the midterm, but missed out on certain aspects, which shouldn't be the case. And I've seen that even in homework submissions. You miss out on a couple of things, even though I've specified that there are things that are needed, not just your logic. Your logic may be perfect, but believe me, it is of no use if you don't have the other aspects of your source code in there. And I'm not just saying it just to make your life boring and tedious. It is the way it is. If you want to pursue software development, there are many, many aspects of software development that you have to endure. And one of them is documenting your source code. And the other is making sure that it is indented properly, styled and formatted properly. Variable names are chosen correctly. Class names are, correctly, and appropriately named. All of this matters. It's not just your logic. Because when somebody else goes to read your code, they should be able to not get lost in the cryptic nature of your code. If your code is cryptic in the sense that if it uses, single letters for variable names, it's not very easy to understand, believe me. With 10 lines of code, it's okay, but what if it's 500 lines of code? And in reality, classes are that long. There's a lot of code in any software installation that you have to go through. And it gets very, very difficult if names are not chosen appropriately. Because the human brain understands better, and especially, with programming languages, it's not as simple as reading a passage in English or a book in English or any other language that you may know. Code itself is cryptic, and if you make it even worse, it becomes even more difficult. So that's all I'm going to say about, using best practices when you're writing software, not just in Java, in any language. Okay? And if you're going on to, doing more of programming in other institutions, other four-year colleges, believe me, they will not tolerate this. I know for a fact. They will just take away points, and there is no negotiation. Places like Virginia Tech, they will not accept code which does not have every aspect that is needed. They will not. I mean, they might take away quite a few points, even though your logic may be correct. I know that for a fact. And you cannot negotiate that. Because a lot of these places use automated grading, meaning there is a software program or a web service somewhere that will grade your work. And it'll look for patterns in your code, and that's how it grades it. And it also has automated testing, which means that it takes your class and puts it through a bunch of tests and grades it based on the outcome of those tests. Okay? All right, I'm going to let you all go early today, but please make sure that you come for the next class. We are going to that's the only class on strings, and it is really important that you attend that from start to finish, because there's a lot in strings that we have to accommodate in one class. All right? All right, everybody. Thank you.